Phoenix, Arizona, 1997. As thousands of local residents stared up into the vast cosmos of the desert night sky, they were confronted with what many reported to be a giant, triangular-shaped spaceship with several lights underneath it, so vast that it even blocked out the stars above it. In a massive insult to their intelligence, the military claimed that these were just flares that were dropped outside the city as part of an Air National Guard training exercise. Now, more than 26 years later, the mystery still persists. Did aliens visit the skies over Phoenix in 1997? Or were these lights merely just airborne flares? Welcome back to episode 20 of Super Mystery Bros, the podcast where we treat mysteries like piñatas, brutally beat the shit out of them until they split open and the truth comes pouring out like a bunch of those nasty-ass Lucas candies.
Or until we swing and miss and hit your friend in the ball sack.
Exactly. My name is Nate, and with me again is Kyle. Kyle, say hi, man.
Hi, Kyle.
I said hi, man, not hi, Kyle.
Hi, man.
There you go. So before we get rolling on this episode, we do have some sad news to announce. Ivan's no longer going to be a regular part of this show. He could be back on special occasions, but that remains to be seen. So Kyle's going to be the new main co-host from now on. So I'm sorry if that disappoints anyone. I'm disappointed too, but we got to work with what we've got. So it is what it is. Kyle, you got big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I do. I will do my best, but no promises.
Yeah. So, I mean, we couldn't have gotten this show off the ground in the first place without Ivan. So if you happen to be sitting on a curb somewhere drinking a 40-ouncer, pour some out for our homie Ivan. Gone, but not forgotten. Kyle, speaking of homies, what can our homies out there do to help us out in our cosmic journey into the unknown?
Well, Nate, our homie listeners can always, do us a solid by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever app it is you use to listen to, this amazing podcast we got going. You can always drop us a line at supermysterybrospodcast@gmail.com. Just let us know how we're doing, how you're doing, comments, criticisms, couple other tips. Right? Just tell a friend. Just tell one friend and see if it spreads like the COVID plague, or something cool I came up with. Get a white t-shirt, plain white tee, get a big Sharpie Super Mystery Bros on it, and go to a concert or your favorite local bar, right? Just be a walking billboard for this awesome podcast that by we I mean Nate, puts so much blood, sweat, and tears into.
Yeah. Also, our producer Davis, he's underrated.
Yes, he is.
Do you have anything that you'd like to say before we roll? Oh, actually, before we begin, I do want to just provide a disclaimer that I've got a fucking horrendous headache right now, so I am not firing on all cylinders today. So it is what it is. But Davis, he was cracking the whip on us, and he told us that we made a commitment to the truth, so we've got to keep things moving.
Yeah, and that guy does not take no for an answer.
No, damn straight. Do you have anything that you'd like to say before we get going here?
I don't think so, man. I think we are ready to rock and roll.
Today marks 26 years since the mysterious Phoenix lights appeared over the valley.
And we still don't know what it was, but there are plenty of theories out there. It was the evening of March 13th, 1997. People across Arizona, especially here in the valley, reported seeing a silent, miles-long V-shaped group of lights gliding quietly overhead. Was it a military mission, a prank perhaps, or visitors from outer space? The questions and confusion over the sighting have only grown during the prevailing years.
Phoenix, The capital city of the great state of Arizona, with average summer high temperatures reaching 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius, Phoenix is widely considered to be hotter than Satan's ballsack. Surrounded by nothing but a landscape of distant mountains, cacti, and various shrubberies, it feels kind of like that one Smash Mouth song where they sing about walking on the sun. Peggy Hill said it best, quote, "This city should not exist. It is a monument to man's arrogance," end quote.
Speaking of man's arrogance, who the fuck is Peggy Hill?
Hank Hill's wife, dude, from King of the Hill.
Oh, I guess I should have put that together.
Yeah, you should have. But in this great, yet unparalleled city of arrogance, a peculiar event took place in 1997. An event so shocking that it left thousands of local residents bewildered as they stared up in the night sky in disbelief. In a time where the Hale-Bopp Comet was passing over the skies of the southwestern United States, and the Heaven's Gate cult was preparing to, quote-unquote, evacuate the Earth by committing ritualistic mass suicide, all while wearing the same pair of Nike tennis shoes, a different, more shocking aerial event took place in the skies over this desert paradise. So did you hear that they discovered another body in that Heaven's Gate cult mansion recently?
Recently?
Yeah,
Dude,
just
that was
like a
97.
few years.
There's
A few years ago, yeah, they found another body there that they didn't find before.
wow. I wonder where that motherfucker was hiding out.
Yeah, dude, he was under the sink the whole time behind the comet.
Oh, fucking boo. Yeah. World-renowned actor and pillar of the Hollywood community, Kurt Russell, who is also a friend of the show, by the way, and a licensed pilot, had been flying his small plane into Phoenix on the evening of March 13th, 1997, along with his stepson Oliver Hudson, and became the first known person to report the phenomenon to any authority. Kurt had been flying Oliver into Phoenix to see his girlfriend by his own account. As the two flew over Phoenix preparing to land, the two spotted strange lights over the airport. Quote, "I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform V-shaped formation," end quote, he would later describe in an interview. His son Oliver would also ask him what they were, to which Kurt would respond with an honest, quote, "I don't know," end quote, before reporting the lights to the tower at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, making him the first person to report the sightings. However, the tower responded back that they showed nothing on their radars. Quote, "I was feeling like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind," end quote, he would later say. You know what would be great is if we actually had a recording of his or any other pilot's communications with an air tower that night to actually hear what these people describe seeing.
It probably exists somewhere, but I don't think we're ever going to hear it. At 8:10 p.m., local Arizona resident Ross Nickel and his family were driving on Highway 89 outside Chino Valley, 90 miles north of Phoenix. Quote, "I looked out the window and I saw some lights in a very small pattern, and what they really looked like at that point was some just dim stars, several of them in a very tight pattern," end quote. Quote, "They were like whites, quote, "they were white like stars when they were coming toward us, and at that point, they changed colors and went from white to red. They were just overhead at that point, and they were, in my estimation, not very high off the ground. I'm guessing 1,000 feet. And there was absolutely no sound. During the whole time, from start to finish, there was absolutely no sound," end quote. He went on later to state, quote, "There was definitely 5 of them. They were basically on a flight pattern of some kind that was fairly uniform," end quote. And lastly, quote, "We saw them travel over a distance of probably 70 to 80 miles over about 12 to 13 minutes. No flares that I know can do that," end quote. So, real quick, I just want to point something out that when you're looking at lights in the sky, it's so hard to judge distance and speed. Like, I don't know how he came up with 70 to 80 miles over 12 to 13 minutes. Yeah, that just makes no fucking sense to me.
Yeah, it's really tough to tell, because something could be moving like horizontally across the horizon to your perspective, or it could be coming at you, which would make it even harder to tell distance and speed, but people want to act like they know everything.
Yeah.
20 minutes later, at 8:30 p.m., 90 miles south, a commercial airline pilot and his wife were driving home from dinner. The pilot agreed to tell his story to the show Unsolved Mysteries on condition of anonymity. Quote, "I've been flying for 29 years now, and I'm not used to looking up in the sky and not being able to figure out what I'm seeing. I looked at it then and tried to make it into an airliner. I realized again, God, it's going too slow, and oh, by the way, there's no noise at all. And then the next thing that struck me is that, yeah, and why would his landing lights be pointed straight down? Because the lights appeared to be about 5 lights arrayed in this V formation with landing lights pointed straight down," end quote.
Yeah, so landing lights are just like, think of it as like headlights for a car. You know, they beam out in one specific direction. 14 miles southeast of the pilot sighting, a woman by the name of Ozma Linderman and her boyfriend had their very own sighting. She told Unsolved Mysteries the following, quote, "It was very clear in my mind that it was one solid craft. The lights were traveling too perfectly spaced apart, and that there was a void clearly between the lights that blacked out the stars when it came down," end quote. Quote, "The whole thing just slowed. I don't know, maybe just to a stop, or it hovered for a second, and then what looked like one solid red oval object. It just turned red and shot straight up and disappeared. Gone. Completely gone," end quote. End quote. "I'm certain that the lights that I saw were not aerial flares as used by the military. I've seen them from the ground. I've seen them from the air, and these weren't flares. And probably the major reason why these were almost certainly not flares dropped by the military was that they're dangerous, so they would never ever be dropped over a population center," end quote.
I would like to argue that if you dropped a parachute flare high enough, it would go out well before it hit the ground, but you still don't want the general public playing with spent flare shells, you know?
Correct.
Especially if one doesn't ignite when it's launched. Now you have a live flare that people can just play around with. To my knowledge, parachute flares are magnesium, which burns bright white, and now we have a couple of reports of these things turning red. All right. At 8:45 p.m., truck driver Gary Morris saw the strange lights about 80 miles south of Ozma Linderman. Truck driver Gary Morris told Unsolved Mysteries, quote, "You know, I tried everything I could to explain them away. And I said, well, it looks to me like a flock of geese flying down from Iowa with flashlights in their mouth. They didn't look like floodlights. They didn't really look like spotlights. There was something different about them that I had never seen before," end quote. By 9 p.m., the Phoenix lights had apparently traveled 300 miles and had been seen by hundreds of eyewitnesses. All hell was breaking loose across the city as people began to peel their sweat-stained t-shirts off the back of their chairs in order to rush outside and view the spectacle happening over their city.
By 10 p.m. that very same night, local resident Michael Crisden grabbed his home video camera and began shooting video of strange balls of light floating over the twinkling city of Phoenix. Quote, "And before I know it, an entire display of lights comes on. I got a little excited at that time, and I called my wife. It took her about a minute to get over there, and it was really quite unusual," end quote. So just a note that whenever you look up a video of the Phoenix lights, the footage that Michael Crisden took is probably the most famous from the event. It's kind of like what the Patterson-Gimlin film is for the Bigfoot world. So there's also another video of the incident that was shot 15 miles away at the same time from a slightly different angle from an anonymous eyewitness.
Yeah, I looked up as many videos as I could. I'm not sure which one Michael Crisden took, but
he took the one where it shows kind of the city below, and then above are the 6 lights. I think there's about 6 lights. Can we just describe the video real quick? It's a shitty, grainy home video footage taken from a shitty video camera.
All of the videos and pictures taken, because it was 97 and because all video and photo of Unsolved Mysteries are always grainy and shitty. I think it's just the way of the universe.
Yeah, you can't really tell what these are. They're just little dots in the sky.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it would look way more spectacular in person.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, and for most of the videos I saw, I couldn't make out like a definitive V shape, but it sounds like the people that were right underneath this thing saw a giant V in the sky. I was really hoping to find a picture or video of that, but to no avail. Captain Drew Solons of the Air National Guard told Unsolved Mysteries, quote, "The 104th Fighter Squadron of the Maryland Air National Guard's 175th Wing was conducting a night training exercise in the vicinity of the mysterious lights. And what they were doing was dropping night illumination flares over the North Tactical Range of Luke Air Force Base. And a lot of people seem to think that those flares could, in fact, have been the quote-unquote mysterious lights," end quote. Later, he said, quote, "If you lived in Phoenix, these flares, some of them were dropped at 14 and 15,000 feet. They burn very bright. They burn for 5 to 6 minutes. They're suspended by a parachute, and it's a large flare. You would be able to see those flares, I would imagine, for 150, maybe even 200 miles," end quote. Even some of the most prominent and important people in the country witnessed the event. Meghan McCain, the daughter of the late Senator John McCain, who was a senator for the state of Arizona at the time, claims that the event made her a believer in the UFO phenomenon. When she was just 12 years old, her neighbor called the house and told Meghan about the strange lights that were coming up in the sky. Upon hanging up the phone, she told her mom Cindy about the strange objects that were being spotted, and then all hell broke loose. Their phone began ringing off the hook as their family, friends, and neighbors began to ask if what they were seeing was what they were seeing. Yeah, so once again, in reference to the flares, yes, parachute flares do burn extremely bright, and if they're, if they're high enough in the sky, I'd believe you could see them for well over 100 miles. Nate, have you ever seen a parachute flare in real life? Like, I've only seen them in like movies, but
no. I don't think I have in real life.
Yeah, but you know what they're designed to do. Like, they're designed to light up like almost
huge
an entire
areas.
Square, square miles of area. Like it's daytime when there's no moon out, when it's pitch black.
Yeah, exactly. And the only problem I have, these could be flares, but the only problem that I have this whole story, if these are flares, is these flares don't last very long. They only last several minutes. So these people report seeing these balls of light hovering for hours.
Yeah.
So it's either not flares or it is flares and people are tripping, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
Quote, "At first, Mom wasn't sure how to react. My dad was away in Washington, D.C., and she didn't want to terrify a house full of kids, especially right before bedtime. Eventually, she allowed me and my brothers to go out to the yard to take a look for ourselves. And there it was, giant bright objects floating in a straight line in the distance," end quote. According to Megan, the lights she saw were 9 seemingly stationary lights that hung over the city for hours before they suddenly disappeared over the horizon, which would conflict with the official military report that these were flares, which would only burn for about 6 minutes each, as I said before. Megan recalls her brothers going up to the roof of their house to watch the lights and singing the X-Files theme song. So, do you think if our podcast was around in 97, they'd be singing our theme song instead?
Oh, hell yeah.
Although Megan's brothers were excited by the so-called Phoenix lights, they left young Megan shocked and horrified by what she saw.
Within days, Tucson Weekly broke the news that the Maryland Air National Guard in Arizona for winter training had a squad of A-10 Warthogs flying over the gunnery range that night, and they had dropped flares. An Arizona Air National Guard public information officer, Captain Eileen Bynes, had determined that the flares had been dropped at 10 p.m. over the North Tac Range, 30 miles southwest of Phoenix, at an unusually high altitude, 15,000 feet. So yeah, like we were saying, these flares are meant to illuminate the ground, and when you drop them that high, that light's not going to reach the ground to a point where like a ground unit can see, right, enemies or vehicles or whatever out in the distance.
Yeah, and the other problem that I have, or just the other part of the story that I just can't square, is that the lights were moving from northwest to southeast over Phoenix. So they should have been seen southwest of Phoenix if that's where they were dropped. So yeah, that's just something that I can't figure out what it could be. What could the reason be?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that later.
During a now infamous press conference, which was called shortly after the incident, the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, who himself was a former U.S. Air Force pilot that served in the Vietnam War, stood in front of reporters at a podium. He began to address the alleged incident, and shortly into his opening statement said the following, quote, "And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party," end quote. His chief of staff then walked in from stage left, wearing a full alien costume and handcuffs. Quote, "Don't get him too close to me, please," end quote. Nervous and hesitant laughter can be heard in the room before he goes on to say, quote, "This just goes to show how you guys are entirely too serious," end quote, before stronger laughter erupts in the room.
Yeah, I didn't watch that video, but when I read about that, I started laughing. I thought that was a pretty cool stunt.
Yeah.
Fife Symington was widely criticized and skewered publicly for treating such a serious event as a joke, particularly by ufologists and UFO believers. He ended up leaving office later that year, 1997, after being indicted on 21 federal counts of extortion, making false financial statements and bank fraud, and subsequently being convicted on 7 of those counts, resigning from his governorship the following day. In the years since leaving politics, he has changed his tune on the story and treats it as less of a laughing matter, and has expressed his dissatisfaction with the Air Force's explanation that these were flares. Although he accepts that flares may have been dropped that night, he believes that the Phoenix Lights were something completely separate. Let's roll a 2-minute clip from an interview from former Governor Fife Symington taken by a local Fox reporter in 2014.
March 13th, 1997. This event called Lights Over Phoenix. What did you see?
Well, I saw a huge craft just kind of come right over Squaw Peak. That was, it was just breathtaking. Unquestionably it was a UFO, which means unidentified flying object.
That doesn't mean we're being visited.
Well, it's nothing like anything I've ever seen.
And you're an Air Force guy.
Yeah, and a pilot. Got a lot of hours flying. So it was pretty breathtaking. And I'll never forget, I snuck out to see it, without DPS, which I'm not supposed to be driving my own car and that kind of thing. And so, but I told Ann what I was doing. I was going to go up to Squaw Peak and see what everybody was, clamoring about. And when I walked in the front door, she looked at me, and I was apparently normally I'm fair complected and pale anyway, right? And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "she looked like a ghost. What did you see?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I saw, but it was really something, and I'm not going to talk about it." And
wow.
So,
did it frighten you?
No, I think I was kind of in awe, really,
How big?
Bigger than anything I've ever seen in the sky.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky?
Yeah. Something like that, yeah. And it was hard to define because of the light in terms of the size, but it was absolutely silent and had sort of eerie embedded lights. And, so that's what I saw. And I wasn't expecting to see anything because I was looking out over at Luke,
right
to the west. And then all of a sudden, these people in the park area just on the west side of 51, there were a bunch of people there. Everybody said, "Oh, look at that!" And we turned around, and this thing was coming from the northwest, traveling to the southeast.
All right, man. So, what's your main takeaway from that?
That this thing was gigantic, right?
Yeah.
Fife said that it could be as the size of like an aircraft carrier in the sky. Now, I know you said that, when you see planes in the sky, lights in the sky, it's really tough to gauge distance, speed, and even size. But I mean, to say something looks like the size of an aircraft carrier in the sky, that kind of speaks volumes.
Yeah, plus this guy is a former Air Force pilot. He served in Vietnam. I'm sure he knows what night illumination flares look like. I mean, I'm sure he's dropped them before. It's hard to argue with that. I'm not saying that he's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's kind of hard to argue with that. I don't know. I wasn't there,
Yeah, exactly.
And these shitty videos of the incident, I guarantee you that they probably do no justice towards what it actually looked like. It's like
No.
anything. When you see it on TV versus in person, it gives you a completely different impression.
Yeah. Well, hundreds upon hundreds of people wouldn't have stopped their own night dead in its tracks to go outside and look up at this thing if it looks anything like the shitty grainy video that's available.
Yeah, and I'm sure with Luke Air Force Base right there with the North Tactical Range and all, I would also wonder how common it is to see dropped flares.
I mean, at that height, like somebody said, that's not common. At 14 to 15,000 feet, that's not what those flares are for.
Well, yeah. So I also want to add, so when we talked about Symington getting indicted and convicted of certain charges, he was actually pardoned by Bill Clinton in January of 2001, right before he left office, which I thought it was kind of odd considering that Symington was a Republican.
Well, I don't know. I've got no comment on that because I don't want
Me
the show
neither.
Yeah, I don't want the show to get political.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to Dr. Lynn Katai, a medical doctor and a witness to the event and author of the book Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. The military's explanation is complete bullshit. Quote, I don't know what they were, but I know that they were. It was a mile-wide formation of these orbs, and I caught them head-on turning into a V, end quote. Dr. Katai cites eyewitnesses who claim to have seen an actual craft, not just lights, flying over Arizona on that night, black or gunmetal in color. However, Ty Groh, a former F-16 pilot, refutes this and believes the flare explanation to be entirely plausible, explaining that flares react like hot air balloons, going where the wind takes them, meaning that a steady breeze can carry them all in the same direction, causing them all to move in unison with each other at a constant distance. He went on to further explain that extremely bright objects such as flares can appear closer than they really are, and experienced it himself while flying F-16s. Quote, you'll be looking at airliners that look like they're 10 miles away, and they're really 400 miles away, end quote, he said.
As you have probably gathered by now, despite thousands of people witnessing the same event, nobody can seem to agree on what it was. The year following the Phoenix Lights, in a 1998 article in the New Times written by Tony Ortega, he wrote of a man by the name of Mitch Stanley who witnessed the lights through a large Dobsonian telescope. I had to look this up for anyone who's curious. A Dobsonian telescope is a popular telescope for amateur astrologists. It's really like
astronomers.
Astronomers. I wrote astrologists. I don't know the difference.
Astrologists is like what your star sign is and shit.
Whatever. Fine. Popular for amateur astrologers. Star watchers,
Whatever.
Stargazers,
Okay.
the night people. So anyways,
The people of the night.
it's a no frills thing. You know, I looked it up to see if this was any kind of special telescope for identifying UFOs. It's not. He wrote, quote, it was plain to see, Mitch Stanley says. Under magnification, Stanley could clearly see that each light split into pairs, one each on the tips of squarish wings. Even under the telescope's power, the planes appeared small, indicating that they were flying high. Stanley says he followed the planes for about a minute, then turned his telescope to more interesting objects. End quote. Stanley said, quote, they were planes. There's no way I could have mistaken that, end quote. End of article.
All right, so let's just go over the aftermath and conclusion of our story. So as the story of the Phoenix Lights grew in fame, the story itself began to evolve, and it's become difficult to separate fact from fiction. And as the years and decades have passed, the story has become one giant game of telephone. Some have accepted the official explanation that these were just flares that were dropped at high altitude by military aircraft. But some witnesses insist that they saw not just lights in the sky, but a giant V-shaped craft that the lights were attached to, which blocked out the stars in the night sky as it passed slowly and silently overhead. Allegedly, the so-called Phoenix Lights were first spotted over Henderson, Nevada, before heading in a southeasterly direction, and then after passing Phoenix, they were then allegedly spotted later on in Mexico.
Quote, we call it the Phoenix Lights, but it's not really completely accurate, end quote, said Richard Dolan, referencing the sightings hours earlier in Nevada. Quote, "You're talking about two distinctive types of events. Could be related, could be the same thing, could be something different," end quote. To muddy the waters even more, the Phoenix Lights were being spotted at around 8 p.m. on that night, while the military claims that they were dropping flares between 9 and 10 p.m. on that night, causing a huge discrepancy. If these really were flares, then either the eyewitnesses or the military, or both, are reporting the wrong time. Furthermore, if these were flares, they would burn out after about 5 to 6 minutes. But these were being reported as lights that hung in the sky for hours. Were the eyewitnesses really seeing lights that hung in the sky for hours, or were these just flares that were being deployed again and again over the night sky by the military?
Was this all a misunderstanding? A game of telephone that spiraled out of control? Or was the city of Phoenix, Arizona, visited by a strange craft from another world? Kyle, your thoughts, go.
My thoughts. There's definitely arguments to both. There are more arguments supporting UFO, right? So I will go over the shorter list of arguments arguing the flares. Like I said, I saw multitude of videos. A lot of these differ in a lot of ways. One thing they all have in common, like we said, they all fucking suck. They're shitty, grainy videos. You know, I couldn't find a one of the triangle that people saw that was the size of an aircraft carrier, that if you look straight up at it, you couldn't see stars through the V, right? Like it was a solid object, just outlined by lights. Some of the clips I did see, one were bright white lights that, you know, kind of appeared in unison, and then it seemed to be about 5 to 6 minutes later, they all kind of started going out. Granted, in a different order, but I mean, it's a flare. They could burn at different rates.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely saw a video that very possibly was flares, and the guy who shot the video, I believe he said it was at about 10 p.m., which is when the military said that they were dropping flares. So I'll give them that one. Some of the videos, these lights appear orange, and in some of the eyewitness accounts, they said that the lights turn from white to red before disappearing.
That's a flare.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, right before they burn out, they go red, and then they go out.
Okay, I didn't know that, because I do know that parachute flares burn white, or at least I'm fairly certain that they burn bright white.
Yeah.
I did not know. So there you go. There's another argument for the flares, is it turns red.
Do, before you move on, though, I do want to say that I think Fife Symington accepts the fact that some of them were flares, but there was also another event that was completely separate from the flare deployment.
I wholly accept that too. Whether that was related, you know, like the government knew about the lights and then decided to go drop flares so that they could, you know, use that as an excuse. Yeah, mask it, use it as an excuse later on. I'm not sure, but there were definitely enough reports and sightings and even a couple of videos that definitely point to flares. Now, the majority of witness reports and the videos, there is no fucking way that these are parachute flares, right? These lights are in the sky for hours. Parachute flares do not burn that long, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like, I agree with you. If you take the eyewitness accounts at face value and accept it as fact, then yeah. But what I've learned over the years is that you can't really trust eyewitness testimony very, very much, because people are wrong.
I agree, but you have multiple pilots reporting this and saying that there's no fucking way that what I saw was parachute flares.
Yeah. God, dude, this one is one that I don't have a strong opinion on. I think I lean more towards it being flares, but you know, it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, you know, because you get reports of them moving from northwest to southeast, when I guess where these flares were being dropped was supposed to be in the southwest of the city, which is in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And then you also get them moving over the city, not just outside of the city, but going over the city.
Yeah, which is not where you're supposed to drop ordnance, any kind of ordnance, even if it's a parachute flare, because like I said earlier, you don't want people playing around with the empty canister, or worse, you have a flare that deploys but does not ignite. Now someone has what is essentially a fucking, magnesium bomb. Just some stupid teenager picks it up and goes and hits it with a hammer,
Yeah, exactly. And then the other discrepancy is that the military said that they dropped flares between 9 and 10 p.m., but the most spectacular sightings of the Phoenix lights took place between 8 and 9. Yeah. So, man, it's so hard to parse out what's true in this story.
Yeah, I think that there were two sightings. One, unexplained aerial phenomena, and one fucking parachute flares dropped at 15,000 feet. For why, I would have no fucking clue why you would drop them that high. That's not what that's for. Planes deploy two types of flares: parachute flares for ground illumination at night, and then flares to distract heat-seeking missiles. I'm pretty sure those flares are actually red, though, and they're not attached to parachutes. Like, those are out in like 30 seconds.
It was so hard to find solid information on this case.
Yeah.
So many thousands of people saw it, but it's so hard to get solid facts about what actually happened, because it's all eyewitness testimony, and all the eyewitnesses say something different.
Yeah. Which is, kind of par for the course, in like large group UFO sightings.
It's like, it's like going to a movie theater and watching a movie and then talking to your friend who was there with you, and it's like they saw a different movie than you.
Yeah.
You just saw completely different movies on the same screen.
Yeah. So something that did have me scratching my head, though, right, is that this is the same year that the Heaven's Gate cult killed themselves so that they could, transcend into a UFO that was hiding behind the Hale-Bopp Comet. Same year. Is that?
Do you think they were too late? Because this happened like less than a week before they killed themselves. Do you think that they missed their opportunity?
I did not realize it was that close. I'm not sure if they missed their opportunity, or if what Heaven's Gate believed in actually might have held some weight, right? Like, less than a week before the comet shows up and they all kill themselves, there's actually a procession of UFOs.
Fuck, man. Maybe we're fucked. We got stranded on this dumbass rock, and now they're in.
They're
heaven.
the only ones that had it.
They made it.
Yeah. A really cool quote I heard in a movie about religious beliefs and things like that is, "We can't all be right, but we could all be wrong."
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, man, this is like the first time where I don't really have a strong opinion on what the answer to this mystery could be. I guess it sort of depends on what the facts in this instance are, and it's so hard to get the facts straight because everyone is saying something different. So I'm not sure how much I trust eyewitness testimony on this at all. If these were actually flares, they shouldn't have hung in the sky for more than several minutes, and neither do I think that they should have floated over the entire city, going from northwest to southeast. That doesn't make sense if those were flares. Yeah. So it kind of really depends on who you believe in this instance.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing is so fucking confusing because getting the exact story straight is impossible.
Yeah. There was the one guy with the telescope who zoomed in on it and said it was definitely airplanes. But I mean, reading up on that type of telescope, it sounds like you wouldn't even be able to focus on something that bright anyways. So maybe he was just stargazing and saw something moving and saw a flight of planes. Like, he wasn't even looking at the actual lights themselves.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's important that we don't call things that aren't alien spaceships, because it kind of does nothing but discredit the entire subject matter, and it causes people to scoff at it. When every light in the sky is a ship from another planet, less people are going to start taking it seriously I don't have enough information to make a solid guess as to what this is. The flare explanation does make partial sense, but when you consider what the eyewitnesses said about the lights, it's like it doesn't fit perfectly.
Yeah. It fits pretty well with some eyewitness reports and one video I saw. But then again, I could not find any like raw, unbroken footage that was like an hour long of the same lights hanging out in the sky. Like every video is, chopped down
clip
to like 30 seconds to run in like a newsreel. So definitely hard. I get what you're saying by not just calling everything an alien spacecraft, but that's why I like the acronym UFO. It stands for unidentified flying object. It was something that was in the sky. We don't know what it was. UFO. It's not everyone's fault that when you say UFO, they just assume that means alien spacecraft.
All right, so if these were aliens, why do you think that they would be flying so low over Phoenix?
Phoenix, of all places?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it looks different. It's a humongous city in the middle of the desert, and
but what doesn't make sense to me is like why they would fly that low. Why would they need to fly that low over Phoenix if they're this technologically masterful race of beings that can fly here? Why would they need to fly like just a few thousand feet above the city in a giant spaceship? Why can't they just do whatever it is that they need to do from higher and being less visible?
Here's the thing. We don't exactly know the altitude. That there are plenty of arguments against actually being able to visually guess the altitude. Like all you're seeing is like super bright lights. And like I said, no actual photos or video underneath this thing. It's just way out in the distance. There's super bright lights. The military was saying 14 to 15,000 feet is where they're dropping flares, which is ridiculous. But that's not super close to the ground. That's pretty far up there. And then to, add another idea to that is just this idiocracy type of thing where someone forgets to hit the fucking cloaking switch. They're like that low to like the city to like look, and someone's like, hey, I see a lot of humans looking up at us. Did you hit the cloaking switch? Oh shit, I totally forgot.
Or it's either something like that or they just have like some different logical process where it's like some cultural difference and then this is their like form of teabagging, It's like they're teabagging us and we don't even know it. We just can't understand what it means.
Mystery solved. We are being extraterrestrial teabagged whenever there is a large UFO close to the ground. Like, haha, motherfucker, no one's going to believe you.
All right, man. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Just that last part of, between the Hale-Bopp Comet and Heaven's Gate, less than a week, after this sighting was the only thing that really sent me for a loop and probably my strongest argument that it's actually UFOs.
You think it was the aliens trying to tell everyone, hey, you've got a week. It's time to hop on board.
You know what? I kind of like that theory. Or the aliens knew of Heaven's Gate and it was like a preemptive funeral procession. Things in different galaxies are probably done differently. Here someone dies and then we put them in a box, and sometimes they're put into a car and there's a whole line of cars that drive down the street. Funeral procession. Maybe in this distant galaxy you do that before someone dies.
I can't argue with that, man. All right, man. Do you have any apologies, shout outs, or clarifications you'd like to make?
Well, while we're on the subject of a military aircraft flying around the sky, I would like to give a shout out to the Blue Angels, the Navy's elite fighter pilot demonstration team that has been gracing my hometown with their presence this weekend. I was lucky enough to be outside watering my front lawn and got to watch the majority of their routine because I'm close enough to the airbase they are performing at. So shout out to the Blue Angels. To top-notch, elite, best of the best fighter pilots in general in the world. These guys fly at ridiculous G-forces and speeds at what appears to be inches from each other.
Yeah. I guess, is that all you got?
That's all I got. What about you?
Yeah, I'd like to just apologize for my dismal performance on this episode because the entire front half of my head feels like it's going to explode. So I just want to say that before we get out of there. But like I said, Davis, he cracked the whip on us and we had to do it.
Gotta do it, man. We do not rest. We must bring these unsolved mysteries to the forefront of public knowledge.
And we have to bring them to justice, honestly.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether. And with our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
So I grabbed a can that looked cool and had like a cool name. I forget exactly what the name was, but it was a pickle flavor beer, and I couldn't even drink one of them.
Jesus Christ, dude. Why the fuck are people doing that? They're just running out of ideas.
Yeah. Yup.
Who's gonna like sit down on the couch and watch, like pop in a DVD and just like drink a 6-pack of those?
A pickle flavored beer.
I just imagine it's some guy who's like your dad, when your dad would sit down in his easy chair and just have like a Budweiser in his beer koozie, just like picking at his toenails and shit while he's watching TV and just like downing a 6-pack of pickle flavored beer. Just casually, like it's nothing.
Wow, you have a very good recollection of what my dad likes to do.
Oh, dude, one of my favorite memories of being at your house was when we were in your living room together. It was me, you, and your dad, and that Keanu Reeves movie was on. It was the War of the Worlds, and
oh yeah.
Your dad was just chilling on the easy chair. And, just drinking beer like his normal self. And he's just quiet the whole time, just minding his own business, watching the movie. And then, the movie ends and he lowers the leg rest with his legs and he gets up off of the chair and he's like, well, that was a fucking stupid movie.